In this episode of the Global Travel Channel podcast show, I speak to a man who incorporates media and radio with humanitarian work into his life mission. Hello and welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. My name is Mark Philpott. On the show, I talk to people from across the world about all things related to travel, from amazing adventures to inspiring stories to the not so well-known destinations. We cover it all. You can find all of our previous podcast episodes on our website at www.globaltravelchannel.com. Or if you like, you can download them from iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, and a host of other locations that are all listed on our website. The Global Travel Channel is a collaboration between travel writers, photographers, YouTubers, podcasters, and travel bloggers from across the world. We bring you information that we hope makes your next travel experience an awesome one, no matter where you decide to go to. You can also find the Global Travel Channel on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. So please go there and subscribe, like, and follow us so that you can keep updated on our new content postings as and when they happen. You can even now support us on Patreon. We have our own Patreon page under Global Travel Channel, and for as little as the price of a cup of coffee per month, you can help us continue to produce the podcast show. So if you do like our content, and you want to support us, then Patreon is one of the ways that you can do that. Now on to today's show, and my guest today is the host and creator of The Edge of Adventure, the video series for those who seek adventure and purpose in life. So it's from my boat here in Australia all the way over to the United States of America to meet my guest. So it's a very warm welcome to Adam Asher today. Adam, welcome and thanks for joining me on the Global Travel Channel podcast show.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. It is an honor to be here. Thanks for making the time to have the conversation.
Now, before we start off, we've got to thank a mutual friend of ours, Zan, from wheregalswander.com, because Zan introduced you and I, and if it wasn't for her, we wouldn't be chatting today, probably.
That's right. First of all, I'll say Zan is absolutely one of the best friends a person could have. She's a fantastic lady. A great professional in so many ways, and I have really enjoyed watching her platform grow, which of course it's called Where Gals Wander at wheregalswander.com, and she's, that thing has really taken off, so she's an inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. Now, we can't go any further also without telling all of my listeners whereabouts in the world you are talking to us from today.
Oh, no, that's top secret. I can't say that. Well, actually, okay. I do like to travel, and I would love to be in any number of places this evening. I am at what I would consider my headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, beautiful. I'd love Atlanta and been there many, many times. And for those that are listening to us today who want some stats on Atlanta, then we've got this one, which is that Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport is the 7th busiest airport in the world by passenger numbers as of today. Did you know that, Adam?
I did not know the exact number. You're right, I did not. But we often hear about how busy Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport is here in Atlanta. And anybody that goes through it understands a couple of things that, yeah, they're moving a lot of people through there. And I do have to say, having been in quite a few different airports, the Atlanta airport, they move a lot of people through that airport very well.
What's your favorite airport in the world?
Whichever one is the current trip, wherever I'm going,
Good
I'll take
answer,
it. They're all exciting. Especially the ones I think I do like in general, the best ones are the ones where you get out of the airplane onto the tarmac. Those are always my favorite.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, I don't want to move on from Atlanta just yet because I want to share with the listeners that if you visit Atlanta, I want you to go to Piedmont Road and go to the Bones restaurant because right there you'll find some of the best steaks in the United States of America, bar none. And I can highly recommend that place. And no, they're not paying me to say this on this podcast.
You're right. That's one of my favorite restaurants. It's a fantastic place, fantastic food, service, and all of it. They come very well recommended. I will say that living here in Atlanta, it's easy to forget or overlook the fact that I guess they call it a foodie town. Atlanta is a town with a lot of great restaurants. It really is.
Is it your hometown, Adam? Have you always lived in Atlanta?
Um, Thanks for that great question. So I do consider it home. I've lived here for the last 20 years in Atlanta, but even before that, I'm a Georgia boy. I grew up in Georgia.
Hmm.
And even before living here as making Atlanta home, even before that, it was sort of a home away from home. My mom is from Atlanta. My grandparents, who passed away many years ago, but my grandparents raised their family here in Atlanta. So I feel a very personal tie to the city,
Hmm.
even though I might not have grown up here exactly. It
Hmm.
was
Hmm.
always a second home because I have so much family here.
Now, is it a city that's growing as far as tourism goes? Are there more and more tourists coming to Atlanta, both from the domestic travelers as well as international?
Atlanta is an interesting place, and here's how I would describe it. We're a community. We're a city. We're an overgrown small town. You know, we're like 6.5 million people now. It's rather large,
Hmm.
but we have so many people from other parts of the country, other parts of the United States, and so many people from around the world who now live here and call Atlanta home, that Atlanta has become, certainly in the last 20 to 30 years, it's become an international city. You have lots of great people. Some of the best people from around the world have come to Atlanta and made Atlanta home. And it makes for what I think to be a really great mix of culture. And that's something that I always like and appreciate. You know, you have the Southern culture from, you know, what we might think of as the old South. You've got the
Hmm.
Southern culture here, and then of course, you know, we're in a city that has had in previous decades a reputation of maybe struggling a little bit with racial reconciliation. Okay, this is going back several
Hmm.
decades. What I'm very proud of now in this day and age is that Atlanta is a place where people from all over the world, people that grew up here and might be from culturally different backgrounds or from racially different backgrounds, it's really a city where everybody, it's one. We are one here, and I'm,
Hmm.
you know, no place is perfect. I get that, but
Hmm.
Atlanta is a place where you have the Anglo community, and you have the African American community, and you have the Latino community, and then you have all the additional communities and influences from around the world. I really have to say I'm proud of how my city works together. It's just a good place to be.
Hmm. It is a great place, and my first visit was back in 1996 to the Olympic Games, in fact, in Atlanta, and it was such a buzz of excitement and multiculturalism back then. I remember the very first time, and I've been also back many times and associated with my corporate life to the city. So I've seen a lot of different sides to Atlanta during a big sporting occasion like the Olympic Games. The city becomes something different than what it normally is in everyday life, and then again, I guess when it was transitioned back to its real reality, of which is a great city. So yeah, I enjoy it. Now, you and I are going to find out today that we share many things in common, and one of them is podcasting. So you are a fellow podcaster. How long have you been in this game for?
So I got into podcasting as a very reasonable or logical extension of my media career. So my story, in a nutshell, is as a young man, I liked radio, and I liked radio in large part because I liked that ability for the person behind the microphone to connect and to connect with the audience in some way. And so I really was drawn to radio as a younger man. And then when I discovered amateur radio, which is also known as ham radio. A lot of the older folks watching and listening would understand what ham radio is. That when I discovered that, I was really hooked, because it gave me the opportunity to get onto the radio set behind a microphone and to begin communicating. And maybe because I like the sound of my own voice, or I like to talk, I just found it fascinating that I was able to, from my home, from my radio set with the antenna that I built, whatever, I was able, back in the late 80s, really, was when I was doing this, prior to the internet. And I was able to talk to people around the world. And I had friends and people that I spoke to routinely in Europe and in South America and in Australia, for example. And I found that very fascinating. So that led me into radio as a career. I think that was probably, as a teenager, I discovered amateur radio, and that gave way to an interest in professional radio. And I said, hey, I kind of like this. Why don't I just do this for a living? And then after having done that for so long, and the internet comes along and podcasting comes along, I have really enjoyed the ability that we have. We can't take it for granted, Mark. Think about this. You're in Australia. I'm here in the United States. We're having a conversation. We'll be able to share this with people around the world through your platform. That is fascinating. And who wouldn't want to do that, especially if you're like you or me, and we like to meet people. And in my case, certainly I like to talk. So there's that.
Now, you and I were talking just before we started the show today about podcasting, and I'm interested for you to share with my listeners, and also your listeners, what do you find the hardest thing about podcasting? Even though you've had that extensive experience in radio, what do you think are some of the hardest things about podcasting?
So the hardest part about podcasting is really the hardest thing about social media. And it's just the fact that we live in a world that is very content hungry. And so the name of the game, to succeed, the name of the game is to produce good content. And if you're podcasting, the hardest part is making sure you're making time to do podcast after podcast after podcast, as you're doing. And that, as I was prior to starting this conversation, I was talking to you off air, and I was complimenting you on it, because I'm watching you produce a lot of great content in a short amount of time. That's a key to success, and to me, that's one of the hardest parts. And whether you're talking about Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or podcasting, the hardest part is just making sure you keep up with that hunger for content. And then, of course, because everybody's everybody's putting out content, the rest of the question is, am I putting out good content? Is this content that people want? And so if you're putting out, you're making content frequently and you're doing it well, that's a lot of work. That might be the hardest part.
Yeah, exactly. Those are really, really good points. I've also got to ask you, I'm in a fairly unique position here, because I have to check the weather report every time before I do a podcast show, because I'm on a sailboat. Do you have that problem back in Atlanta? Do you have to check the weather report?
Am I supposed? Hold on a sec. Am I supposed to feel sorry for you? What is this? Excuse me, everybody. He's on a sailboat, and I only wish I had that problem. And no, we're pretty good. And right now, at this time of year, this of course is the end of our summer here in Atlanta. This is being recorded in, what is this, the month of September. So it a little bit warm, and we are definitely in a warm spell here in the great state of Georgia.
Fantastic. Now, we're here to talk about travel and a few other things today. And I knew you were a seasoned professional, because I received a bunch of questions from you to ask you about traveling today. But I thought I'd throw those in the rubbish bin and come up with a set of mine.
Yes, get rid of those.
No, I'm just kidding. So usually what I do for a first-time guest, and I hope to have you back many times, I ask you a random question that just comes into my head. And my random question for you today is, what is your favorite snack food when you are traveling?
What is my favorite snack food?
When you're traveling, it's got
When
to
I'm
be when you're traveling.
traveling,
Yeah, what's your go-to snack?
yeah, you know what? I'm gonna say by far the best. Yeah, it would have to be beef jerky.
Beef jerky.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
that's the first time
and
for that. Mm.
yeah, I mean, what I like about it is it doesn't spoil, right?
Hmm.
And you actually are going to get some protein. It's not like a cookie or a cracker or something. And the other thing that's great is it tastes just like a baseball glove.
There you go. There you go. That must be an American thing. Do you guys really enjoy eating leathery type
No,
food? Do you?
no, but I did play little league, so yeah,
Okay, well, you're the first responder I've had for beef jerky, so we're going to put that on the list now. I usually get nuts and chocolate as the
Oh,
primary
no, I don't.
snack foods.
I don't need chocolate for some reason. I People usually hate me for saying this, but I don't like chocolate. So
You don't like chocolate?
no, I don't know.
Okay.
Something's wrong. Something's wrong
There
with me.
is there is somebody in the world. There we are. We found him. Fantastic. Now, travel. You've done quite a bit of traveling, to say the least. And my first real question is what I would usually ask a guest at the end of the show, but I think it's important to flush this one out in the beginning because the reason I started this show is that I appreciate and understand after many years of travel myself how it actually changes you for the better as a person. And I'm interested to hear from you right at the beginning. How has travel changed you as a person? Because it's also going to lead into some of these other things we're going to talk about with you today. Yeah.
So I would say that travel changed me, and when I think back to my first opportunity to leave home and go outside the United States, and
How old
I
were you
was
then?
I was 15 actually.
Mm,
I was
mm,
15. And how did it change me? It changed me. The simple answer would be that it broadens your horizons. So maybe prior to travel, you thought you saw the world because you saw everything around you. And then when you travel and you get the opportunity to go into another culture and meet different types of people, you realize that the world is a much bigger place and it is more varied and than you ever realized. And so when I say it broadens your horizons, literally exactly as that metaphor would indicate,
mm.
I think you just have the opportunity to see farther. And that to me is the biggest change. I mean, obviously, in my case, it became such a meaningful piece, and there are other parts to that. But I think initially, that's probably the biggest change.
And would you say traveling so young made you grow up faster?
I think
Did it help in your trajectory of maturity? I guess that's a better
I
way of
would
putting
think
it.
so. I think probably the short answer would be yes, it did. In my case, I almost think of it in as the inverse. I think I was I was I was born old, and so my childhood and my adolescence, I was always in a hurry to grow up. And I'm not saying I recommend that. That's not exactly how I've raised my son. I've wanted him to enjoy the different stages of life, and that's what I recommend. But I was in a hurry. I wanted to grow up and grow up as quickly as I could. So perhaps because of that, I really jumped on the opportunity to travel.
Now, you've done something fairly unique by combining your passion for travel with humanitarian work. How did you get into that and why?
My very first trip was to Mexico when I was 15, and we drove all the way from Atlanta, so it was quite a road trip just to get to the border, and then from the border we went into the country another 4 hours or so, and then through I guess the following months and years, I made additional trips and so on and so forth. I That was the kind of trip that I was invited to go on was a humanitarian type trip, and we worked with the people in Mexico. I would have gone anywhere, and if they had said, "Hey, hey, you could go on this trip and just hang out on the beach in Mexico, I would have said yes, because I was just so eager to travel. But when I came back, I think I went on the trip expecting to just enjoy the travel part. But when I came back from the trip, I knew that something had changed in me. And I remember, again, I was 15, but I knew at the time that something had changed. And I remember thinking, I don't exactly know what. I can't, but it took a few months before I really began realizing, no, to me, this changes everything. I want to do this. And it was very, yeah, it was a big part, has been a big part of my life, but it started there. That first trip, I just don't think it had hit me yet.
So, how was it emotionally for you traveling for the first time outside of the United States?
I loved every minute of it. I loved every part of it. I'm not sure. I have been asked, well, don't you fear this or don't you worry about that? I, maybe something's wrong with me or the wires don't connect. I don't worry too much about that kind of thing. And I didn't worry then. I enjoyed every minute of it. I enjoyed looking out at the landscape. I enjoyed meeting the people. I was already learning Spanish, so I enjoyed practicing my Spanish and learning Spanish, and I enjoyed meeting the people and eating the food that would be more customary to the people and out in the villages and things like that. Enjoyed every part of it. And I even enjoyed, this just goes to show how time has changed. When I got to the hotel, I remember turning on the TV and watching some television program. I don't even remember what it was, but it was some program in Spanish, probably a soap opera, like they call them. It says a telenovela, like a soap opera or something was on. But I just remember thinking, wow, how awesome that this is in Spanish. Of course, now it's so easy. You can get on the internet, find whatever you want, watch whatever you want. And it's made the world a very small place. But I think back then I was still fascinated by how the world was still a big place.
Travel impacts us in many different ways, and you started talking about that you were open to everything. Were there different elements of the travel experience that started to gravitate towards you particularly? Was it things like the food? Was it the language? Was it the sightseeing opportunity, the interaction with different nationalities and cultures? What kind of things did you gravitate towards when you first started traveling?
To me, the thing that I enjoy the most, I think I enjoyed it immediately at that time and have enjoyed since, which is I enjoy being able to connect with the people. I think that's why I liked radio. I think that's why I like podcasting. And I think ultimately it's why I like travel as well, is it gives me the opportunity to connect with people. And a part of that is language, right? And I speak Spanish fluently. That's wonderful. I wish I spoke every language. I wish I had that ability in other languages, and it's just not the way life works. But it is a wonderful thing to be able to speak Spanish and really share if I'm traveling in Latin America.
It's a real superpower, isn't it, to be able to speak many languages?
It is, and it is one of those things that growing up in the United States of America, right, it's not historically something that our culture values, all right? And of course, our nation's language is English, and it's important, I think, that we all be able to communicate in a language, and that happens to be English. Okay, I get that, but I find it only makes life better to be able to speak a second language. And again, I wish I spoke a third and a fourth and so on. But it allows you it opens up an entire new world, because the world, if you don't speak the language, that world is mostly closed to you. But if you do speak the language, you have the opportunity to connect.
That's so true. That's so true, yeah. I lived in Europe for many years, and I was often embarrassed by either a 10-year-old child who could speak 5 languages or a 4-year-old child that could ski down a mountainside faster than me.
Yes.
Those were things that
No,
happened
and that
frequently.
is, yeah, that is something that clearly the European culture, and in many other parts of the world. But with Europe and all the different places that, the different languages and nations that are all prevalent around them, right? They have. I was always kind of envious of that, and I mean, I love my country, definitely an American and all that, but I I think the presence of the additional languages it can make for a more rich experience.
Tell us about your Spanish journey. When and how did all that start for you? Now that you speak fluent Spanish, is that something that you set out to do as a mission in the beginning, or was it because of circumstances of travel, or something else?
Well, oh my goodness, all right. Let me think about the short way to tell this story because it is this was such a Spanish for me was such a big and is such a big part of my life. I not to keep retelling the same story, but because I was interested in amateur radio and was listening at a time prior to the internet when we didn't have the ability to um, hop on the internet and listen to whatever language was of interest, or read the website from whatever country. We didn't have that ability. So through amateur radio, I began hearing all these different languages, and being here in the United States, in the Americas, by far the most prevalent second language was Spanish. And I was just interested in it. And so it caught my interest. Anyway, so I was interested in it, and I think I was probably 14 at the time. Yeah, I would have been about 14. And I was running errands, I guess, with my mom. And we're at a bookstore. Did anybody remember what a bookstore was? I mean, you actually went to a bookstore.
Yeah, good point.
And back before we had the books on our phones and stuff like that. But we were at this bookstore, and there was this Spanish book, and it was how to learn Spanish. And I picked it up, just kind of killing time. I looked through the book, and I looked down at it, and I was just kind of seeing lesson 1 and lesson 2 and so forth. And it made sense to me, Mark. I can't really explain it. It just made sense to me. I remember telling my mom, saying, "Hey, if you will, I think I told her, like, hey, will you buy this book for me? I'll pay you back." Right? I guess because I wasn't carrying any money as a kid. But anyway, we bought the book, and that was really the beginning of my journey. That combined with what I was hearing on the radio, on the amateur radio, I was taken with it, and I was consumed by it, and did really well. But it had a lot to do with, I think, just a natural ability. I mean, I don't have a secret. I can't say, oh, here's the secret to becoming fluent as a second language. I don't know. It makes sense to me. Some people can pick up a guitar. Some people are good at computer programming. It's how their mind works. For me, it was just how my mind worked.
How long did it take you to become proficient in speaking Spanish?
Well, it's a process, of course. So I would say I worked I think probably in terms of grammar, I probably worked really hard on the grammar for a good solid year to 18 months. And by the end of that time, I was doing really well. But there's no substitute for spending time in a Spanish-speaking country, or a country where the language you're trying to learn, where it's spoken. You need to use it. And if I were going to give some advice to somebody and say, okay, whatever language you're trying to learn, here's my advice. Stop being embarrassed. Make mistakes. Force yourself to use the language. You will learn. Who cares if you say something wrong? Who cares if you get started and you forget and you can't finish? Who cares? Who cares? It literally, it just requires a certain bravery. And if you can be brave in that regard, you'll find that the other people whose language you're speaking, they love it. It's an honor that you're even trying. And in the process, they kind of take joy in helping you find, oh, here's that word you're trying to think of, But for me, it's just a fun process. But yeah, you can't learn a language if you're not afraid to make mistakes. It would be similar to saying never go near the pool until you know how to swim. I mean, you got to get in there. You got to learn.
I like the way you say that, because it's actually that learning process that can actually enrich the relationship you have with the people, because they, as you just rightly said, they feel you trying your best to assimilate with them, and they reach out even further and probably deeper when they see you taking that much effort trying to connect with them.
Oh, I agree. Very
Mm.
much that is very much the case. And I, I mean, I remember saying things incorrectly and people laughing, but I never took it as someone trying to make fun or humiliate. On the contrary, they were just enjoying the fact that I was learning the language. So I did have that opportunity.
Mm.
Through the study I studied here in the States, I had a great teacher who incidentally grew up in Europe, in France. She spoke 4 languages. She's since passed on, but she was a wonderful lady and a great friend. Taught me she spoke 4 languages. She taught me Spanish, and she tried to teach me French, but didn't quite stick as well as Spanish did.
Spanish is your thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, humanitarian work and travel, I guess when you combine those two things, you end up with meaningful travel experiences. One could argue far more greater meaningful than just traveling by itself. So, humanitarian work, have you got a couple of the trips that you've done that are over and above anything else and that you'd like to share with us today?
Mm. Yeah. So, wow. I don't necessarily, I'm trying to think what would be my um, favorite, or what would be some of the best trips. And it's interesting because I like them all. There's something in every single um, trip, Mark, that has value. And um, the first trip I went on certainly was powerful, based on the fact that it was my first opportunity. But I also, every opportunity, every chance I've had to see a new place, to meet new people, they each one of them is very, very rich. So picking a favorite is difficult. I like to go places that people don't often go, and there's just something about the opportunity to, um, just meet people and experience life in a place that few Americans or few Westerners get to go. And um, one comes to mind where um, I went with my son and with a dear friend of mine. The three of us went in to the country of Colombia, and we saw different parts of Colombia. We had a sort of a busy trip, but most of our time there was spent on the Pacific coast of Colombia in a very small town called Guapi. And, when I mention that even to Colombians, they don't know. They don't even know where it is. They don't know what it is.
Mm.
It's just kind of a forgotten little corner of the world. But it's a very isolated community where the very few outsiders, even from the rest of the country, go. And it's largely an African Latino population that lives there. And then outside of that small community, are indigenous tribes. And you end up with a very interesting mix of culture, which they are in Colombia. They speak Spanish, but yet they have lived a very isolated, separate life. And so when you're there, or I'm there, as a Westerner, you're very much aware of the fact that they don't see many people like you. And in a way, as I'm trying to think, like, what is it about that matters to me? And I keep going back to, I guess, the fact that I like that challenge of connecting with the people and bridging that gap where maybe they're not so sure about me and I might not be so sure about them. But if I have the opportunity to bridge that gap and make a new friend, it's kind of, to me, there's the ultimate victory. And then in the end, you're in this, obscure little pool hall in this community, and you're playing pool. And I forget how much it cost, but I think per game it was something like 13 cents or something like that of American money. And we're just having a great time with new friends. And to me, that's very meaningful. I know I'm rambling here, but on the humanitarian front, the humanitarian side of things is very important to me and always matters, I guess, because there is suffering in the world, and I'm not naive enough to think that everybody's suffering can be eased or removed. I mean, my own pain is something that I must live with. I mean, I live a fortunate life, but we all have our burdens to bear and our pain. I'm not trying to say that it can be fixed, but if there's anything that one person can do to help another, whatever that might look like, and whether that's in your own hometown or in some isolated village on the Pacific coast of Colombia, it matters to help other people. And to me, the humanitarian effort literally comes down to that. If you boil it right down to brass tacks, what is it? It's one person helping another. And I've been helped in my life by a lot of people. And if I can do a little something to help somebody else, I find great meaning and great purpose in that.
What made you choose or were inspired to go to that particular location in Colombia?
So the location in Colombia is, again, sort of through the network of friends, I suppose. I happen to know someone who works over there, and there's a wonderful community of the indigenous tribe who has moved in from the villages, and this was a decision they made. They live outside of the more western town, and they have their own almost think of it as like a hybrid version of Western culture, because they still very much live like a tribe. They have their families. They look out after each other. It's a bit of a closed knit community, and yet they have moved and gravitated towards some of the more what we think of as Western mindset. And some people have been working with them to just help them get established and teach them and facilitate some of the things that they're working on. But to be quite honest, in that particular case, that community is really an inspiration. They, as I've said, they work together. They're very much a tribe, a family, in the larger sense, but they support themselves by making making different types of items that would be sold perhaps back in the capital city of Bogota, or even shipped back to the United States. So they've got a little business going. And so all the women are out during the day making the baskets and whatever, and the guys are doing their part in making the items out of wood. And the craftsmanship is amazing. So they're doing all that. They're making their money. And that's how they're supporting themselves. And again, in that particular case, I would say by the time I got there, that particular community was a pretty awesome example of growth, and they've pretty much developed all that, I think, within about 7 or 8 years through the help of some people in Colombia who've been helping them. So anyway, I went primarily to spend some time with them and to document some of that, which we did in video.
Fantastic. Now, having been a humanitarian and philanthropist across the world for a number of years, I come across the cliche many times, charity begins at home. So I'm interested to know from you, Why would someone like you with your skill sets go in search of international humanitarian projects when you could probably go out into some of the neighborhoods in your local city and find people that need help? Can you answer that one for me?
Sure. My answer to that would be we should all do something. And if your calling and your ability is to help the person next door or down the street, at the soup kitchen, through whatever organization, and there are many, many fantastic organizations here in the United States and in around the world, I think you should do it. You should help the people, help the legitimate organizations that are working hard to do great things and help others. Help them. I think there's enough of there's enough effort. If we all do something, then there's plenty of effort to go around, and so there'll be plenty here for the folks down the street, and there will be plenty around the world as well. So I think in one sense, my answer would be we should do anything we can wherever we can, and it is not important to me specifically that somebody else like what I like or do what I like to do. They have their own calling. You have your own calling, and we should focus on that. But my particular calling, because of just, I guess, my love of travel and language and Spanish and these things, I have seen with my own eyes how very desolate and desperate some of the areas of the world are. And there's great need everywhere. But some of the need, and I know you know this, but some of the need you will see in the developing world is absolutely devastating. And we can do something to help them. The question is, are we?
Well, that leads me into my next question, because you have a rather unique skill set as far as your radio and media background and your passion for humanity work. How are you combining those things now to make a difference?
So the two terms that I always use when I talk about the edge of adventure, I always bring home the concept of adventure and purpose. And I happen to believe that all of us, in one sense or another, we're looking for our purpose. And I think most of us are looking for adventure. I'm going to say that I think I have run into some who shy away from adventure. I think they're missing something. But I think most people that I come in contact with desire a life of adventure, and they desire for their life to matter. They're looking for their purpose. That gets back to what I saying moments ago about how whatever your calling is, whatever you can do to help someone else, do it. It's a part of what makes our lives matter, in my opinion. So I think we crave adventure, most of us. I think all of us crave purpose. We want to know that our lives and our time here on this planet matter. So, as I kind of struggled with that concept, and I thought, all right, how do I communicate this? I did it in the only way I knew how, and the only way I know how, which is just, I'm going to go to my bag of tricks. I'm going to go to the things I know how to do, and I'm going to try to use those skills in media, radio, and video, and those kinds of things. Use what I've learned in my career to help communicate this message. And in my own sense, or why is important to me, is I think that in the one hand, it's important that we help. I think we can help the people on the ground in the developing world. I think we can actually, go to some of these places. They're tough to get to. It's an exciting, adventurous trip. And I think we can be a part of seeing good things happen to help them. And help them with very real needs, not to try to change their culture. That's not the point, but to help them with real tangible needs. I think we can do that. But there's also another need, and that's the need that the audience, the Western audience, the people that might watch the series here in the United States or around the Western world, we also have a need. And that need is we want to matter. We want to know that we're doing something that matters long term. And that is part of this puzzle that I'm putting together in this thing that I call the Edge of Adventure. And my slogan is beyond status quo, because that's the part that we're all craving. We are looking for that opportunity to go past what we know, out into the adventure, and to live a life that is bigger and better than the one we've had. And we're going to push beyond status quo to get there.
That's really good. I've checked out a number of your videos on YouTube, The Edge of Adventure, and I recommend people get over there and check them out as well. Are you solely looking to do this journey alone, or is there an opportunity if people are listening to this podcast around the world? We go to 64 countries as of today. And if someone's sitting there and really connecting to what you're saying, and they've got some videography skills or they've got some podcasting skills, are you open to collaboration opportunities?
Well, of course. And first of all, Mark, let me just congratulate you. 64 countries, and back to your platform, the Global Travel Channel. Excellent work. And I know in many regards, you are... you've got big goals. I can tell you're building this thing, and it's fascinating. There from your sailboat, you rascal. But it's congratulations on the 64 countries. That's no small task. And so to answer your question, I believe in collaboration. I mean, I believe that the Edge of Adventure, this is what's on my heart. But I have seen, without a doubt, that there are many people who want to be a part of it. And if someone is listening to this and they want to be a part of it, all I would ask them to do, go to the website and let me hear from you. Because if you go to theedgeofadventure.com, again, that's theedgeofadventure.com, you can go there, just like pretty much every website, there's that contact button, and you can send me a note and let me know what you're thinking. I mean, I love to hear other people's stories. I love to see their videos. And absolutely, let me hear from you, and let's help get your story out as well.
Well, I know for sure there's a young man sitting, perhaps listening in the Philippines today. His name's Lloyd, and I'm going to connect him with you because he's doing some fantastic video making over there in the Philippines about exactly the type of thing that you're talking about. So I really want to connect you two. So that will be my commitment to you after the show, Adam, to connect you with Lloyd in the Philippines.
Please do. And then what I will say is, Lloyd, nice to meet you, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Now, what's the long-term objective with the video series? What do you hope to achieve over a said period of time?
My objective is to see the web series, which, of course, I have produced a series where we went to Nicaragua. And if anyone hasn't seen the series and they're thinking, okay, who's this Adam guy, and what is it that he's about, and what is this series he's talking about? Please check it out and let me know what you think. It's a web series. It's 7 episodes. Each of the episodes, they're about 6 or 7 minutes, so they can be taken in pieces. And check out the web series. You can find them online at theedgeofadventure.com, and then let me know what you think. So, where do I want to take it? I think that the series is headed to television, and that is something that I would love to see.
Have you already started embracing that journey in terms of reaching out to particular networks, or is that still something you are yet to do?
That has begun. I'm not going to be able to say too much about that, but
sure.
I will tell you that some great things are ahead, and I am honored to have done what I have done to this point. Again, I got big plans for the future, But what I find perhaps the most encouraging and where since I just feel the most honored is something about what I'm doing resonates with people. And I think that as we continue to expand the reach and the way it is distributed, I think we're just going to see that continue to grow.
Now, you're doing a lot of this in some underdeveloped countries in the world, but also in undeveloped communities. How do you approach this whole cross-cultural communication objective?
So I think one of my favorite parts is just being able to communicate cross-culturally. Now, if I speak the language, as we've discussed, if I speak Spanish, then that's great. I have an opportunity and I have the ability to share in a very personal way, and that's wonderful. But that is not always the case. If you're traveling in other parts of the world, when I am traveling in other parts of the world, I don't have that ability. And, it's a shame. I wish I did. Again, if I could snap my fingers and just, if I spoke every language, I'd be happy. But there is a key very much, I think, in cross-cultural communication, even if it's not verbal and you're not speaking the language. It's very important to be sure that they understand that you appreciate them and you appreciate their culture. Doesn't mean you understand all of it. Doesn't mean you aren't going to make mistakes. But if they know that you appreciate them and you appreciate who they are and where they're from, and obviously you're in their country, that goes a long way. I hate to say it, it's kind of seems foreign to me, but sometimes Westerners will be traveling in these countries and they expect whatever the country is, wherever they are, we can expect them to adapt to us, when really we're the traveler. We're the one that's in the land that is foreign to us, and it's our responsibility. So I think in my case, as we're working with these types of groups, it is just important for them to understand that we do care about them.
How do you approach that sometimes sensitive issue of turning up to a remote village with a video camera and sticking it into the lives of these people who may not have ever seen a video camera before?
Well, what has to be done, certainly, if you're in a situation where it is intimidating or they don't understand what's going on, they need to be made to. It can't be threatening. It can't feel threatening. And look, I mean, there's going to be times where that is an issue, and you work through that. But I think by and large, the trust that they have is a trust that they have in you. And you know what? If you rolled into a town and you're just shooting video and you don't have any sensitivity toward the people, first of all, shame on you. But secondly, I wouldn't blame them for wanting to pull away from that or feel intimidated by it. But if they understand, and hopefully they do, and a part of what has to be communicated is it is a part of telling their story. And much of the time, I have found they want their story to be told.
Interesting. I'm also sitting here wondering what the long-term goal is with you establishing a global network of people who are passionate about going to help in these communities that you're identifying as ones that have particular needs, and what the outcome of that help, compassion, humanitarian effort could actually be. And do all of these communities actually want to be turned into something that the white man wants to bring them? Like, are they not happy with what they've got? Do you understand where I'm going with that?
I do. I think
yeah.
Right. I hear really two questions there. I mean, the first question being, what is the long-term, or maybe it's the same question, but what is the long-term objective? The long-term objective is to help those who need help. It is not to make Western culture out of everywhere you go. And I mean, I don't want people to lose their culture. I do want them to have clean water. I do want them to have medical care. I do want them to know how to, when they get a cut, how to treat the cut so that it doesn't become a massive infection and potentially threaten their life. I want them to, if they so desire, to be able to broaden their own horizons with an education. And in many places, they're already aware of the Western world, the rest of the world. They don't get to participate in it. And so allowing them the opportunity to do so through education and things like that, that can be a very positive thing. Helping, and by the way, let me just clarify, I don't know that I'm good at any of those things, right? My objective with The Edge of Adventure is to tell the story of the people who are good at those things, and the people who have chosen to give of themselves. They might be able to live a nice, cushy life, we would call it, a nice, easy life in some metropolitan city in the United States of America or Europe or somewhere, but they've chosen instead to live a more adventurous life, a more difficult life, so that they can help a group of people, a population, to ease their suffering and help them. And so, back to your question, the objective is not to westernize the world. That's not the point. The point is to help the people learn to take care of themselves and maintain that culture. I think it's beautiful. I think it is absolutely, the culture is important to preserve.
Brilliant. Now, I know that I'm going to have you back on the show to talk about a whole lot of other things, but before I let you go today, let's jump over to some light-hearted moments, and we could perhaps end the show with those. Now, I've seen a lot of you on social media in the last few weeks since we've connected, and there are two things that stand out in particular when I look at Adam online. One of them is the beard, and the other one is the hat. So I'm sure there's a great story behind both of them. Do you want to share those with us?
Okay. Well, you said lighthearted. I'm trying to think of how can I make it lighthearted. The hat, honestly, the hat is probably more than anything, and I'm not going to mention any names, but the hat is in part a nod to a childhood hero. I'll leave that up to your imagination, who that might be. But a little bit of that, and I think back, I liked these types of hats from the time I was probably in middle school, as a young child, a young teenager. I was like, yeah, I like that hat. So, and even then, when I would put the hat on, there was something about putting that hat on that just put me into an adventurous place. And I do think that while I'm not always wearing the hat, but I do like to wear it, and it's a bit of an outward symbol, I guess, that says I'm on an adventure. That's, I think, probably what it means.
Cool.
The beard, I would say I'll probably answer it in two ways. The beard is in part very much the result of my own growth, I guess, my own personal growth as a man. And I'm not saying everybody's got to have a beard or every man has to have a beard. That's not the point. But for me, and anyone who knows me knows that I was a pretty clean-cut, clean-shaven, short-haired guy, and that was who I was. And went through some things in my life, some tough moments. And life will do this to you. It'll come up and kick you in the shins, and I had to make the decision. I had to make the decision whether I was going to give in and cower, or whether or not I was going to stand up and be brave and face those things. And the beard is an outward sign of a decision that I made to stand up to those things and to bounce back. So that would be like my serious answer. I would say that the more fun, lighthearted answer to that is it's just my rebellion.
I'm never going to look at a man's beard the same way anymore after I've just listened to that. I'm going to be going up to every man and I see in the street with a beard and saying, "What's the story behind your beard?"
What's the story?
Yeah, what's the story? What's going on with that beard? That's a fascinating answer, Adam. Thank you for sharing that with us all, because I'm sure, one, it's personal, and two, it was very, very raw and authentic. So I really love that. Now, where's your next trip going to be to? Have you got something already planned? Were you heading off with your video camera and all your podcasting gear?
Well, I would go anywhere, anytime, and there are a couple of things on the docket. I will reserve the right to keep that as a surprise, but rest assured that the team and I are working hard to put some cool things together to take an adventure. And one of the reasons why I love the platform that we've been working on so much is it gives me the opportunity to share it. And that's a big part of what I want to do. I don't just want to go. I want to be able to take the viewers. I want to be able to take my friends and them get to go to places that maybe they wouldn't have the opportunity to, or haven't had the opportunity to yet. So there are some cool things right around the corner, and you, Mark, and everybody else listening will have the opportunity to join us.
Wow, can't wait for it to happen. Now, if you've been listening to us today, my guest on the show has been Adam Asher, the Edge of Adventure host and creator. Check out the edgeofadventure.com. You'll find all of Adam's amazing content there. Adam, you've actually inspired me today to do something on my show that I haven't done before, and I'm going to now do it on every show, and I'll probably do it at the beginning of every show versus the end, but because you're going to be the first, you get to do it at the end. I'd like to offer the opportunity to my guest on the show to actually dedicate the show to somebody in their life. So would you like to dedicate this show today to someone in your life and say that on air so we can send it out to them?
Well, Mark, one of the things that I've admired about your podcast platform and listening to the podcasts and now having been a part of one, you do have a special knack or gift at this. And let me first just say how much I appreciate the opportunity. You've been fantastic to talk with. I do hope that you get to come, that I get to come back and be a part of another episode in the future. If I haven't bored everybody to tears already. But sure. Wow, who would I dedicate this to? There's many people in my life that have been there for me, and I could start naming people, but I wouldn't do it justice. But when the first person, I'm going to answer it with the first person that popped into my mind is my son. His name is Brandon, and he is 22, and I being his dad, and hopefully in some way being the shoulders he gets to stand on, as we say, is the most meaningful adventure in my life. Anybody that's ever raised a son or a daughter knows it isn't easy. And if anyone is in the process of doing that right now, I can tell you this much: it is a marathon, not a sprint. So if you've made some mistakes and you're beating yourself up about it, you got time to correct it. And, Brandon was very forgiving. But yeah, I mean, he means a lot to me. I love him. I'm very proud of him. And I would dedicate this to my son, Brandon.
Beautiful. Well, there we go. You're the first guest that's got the opportunity to dedicate the particular episode, and I'm sure Brandon's going to be very proud of his father when he listens to this particular show. Adam, it's been an absolute honor and treat to have you on my show today. I absolutely want to have you sometime back in the future where we can talk about many other things: podcasting, travel, humanitarian work, philanthropy, building a global network of like-minded individuals, all of that stuff is fantastic and resonates with me. So again, thanks for your time. We're going to put all the links to your social media connections in the description of this podcast, so everybody listening today across the world can find out where you are and connect with you, and hopefully support all the great causes that you're making happen in the world today. Adam Asher, thank you for being on my show.
Mark, thank you for the opportunity. It has been absolutely my honor.
There we are. That was Adam Asher speaking to us from Atlanta in Georgia in the United States of America. Adam, thank you again for coming on my show. That's it for this episode. If you're looking for more episodes from the Global Travel Channel podcast show, just head on over to the website at www.globaltravelchannel.com. There you will find all of our episodes. You can also download this podcast series from Apple iTunes, from Stitcher, from Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, and a host of other locations that are all noted on our website. And don't forget our Patreon page. If you love our content that much and you want to support the ongoing sustainability of the show, just go to the Global Travel Channel Patreon page, which you can also find on our website. And for as little as the price of a cup of coffee per month, you can help us continue our show. Okay, that's it for this time. I look forward to the next opportunity where we can get to share another amazing travel story on the Global Travel Channel podcast show. My name is Mark Philpott. Until then, I wish you all bon voyage.